So this is my review for Witchcraft 70, or what it's titled Angeli Bianchi, Angeli Neri. So this is a documentary, barely, styled film that was recorded and released in 1969. It's an Italian film, and as I just said, the Italian title is Angeli Bianchi, Angeli Neri. I had heard about this film in the past while reading books about the Church of Satan. All I really knew is that Anton LaVey was somewhere in the film, but beyond that, I knew nothing else. I rented the movie on Amazon for 99 cents, and even that felt like having spent too much money, to tell you the truth. I found the film boring and forgettable, honestly. Much of the information was surface level and seemed to focus, especially in the beginning, on things that were obviously not true and then I'm pretty sure were faked for the video. There were scenes from all over the world. It's supposed to be kind of like an, not exactly anthology, but let's just say buffet of quote unquote esoteric things. It was like supposed to show the different beliefs that people have from across the globe. Many of these depictions are dubbed over in Italian. I found it interesting how there were people from the pagan cults that had rituals similar to what you see in footage about the Church of Satan. I don't have any real thoughts about the various belief systems that the people had. I'm the type of person that believes that people should be free to believe in whatever, as long as you're not hurting anybody. What I didn't like about the film, though, is that for a documentary, much of the information was presented in a way to actually, it seemed like they were mocking some of the people, if not most of them. It seemed like they were mocking many of the people it observed. I felt this was especially so when they brought up the Afrocentric Caribbean area religions. Ironically, there wasn't any commentary about how the pagan rituals depicted were obviously just using the women in it for sex. For me, I'd rather not have any opinions in a documentary. I'd rather the information be unbiased, basically. I just want it to be presented facts only. That's what a documentary is supposed to be about, the facts. And to me, there's too much opinion in this. One thing that surprised me was how there was the actual depiction of a goat being killed on film. And I realized, yes, that's like what these people believe, but I was just surprised that they actually included the footage because there was blood being squirted everywhere. And I was like, they were allowed to do that? It made me wonder if scenes like these were what were twisted during the Satanic Panic, which I'm pretty sure they were. And I can imagine that some of the people in the past might have watched that scene and thought that everyone in the film performed animal sacrifices, which, there's very little due diligence done in this, Much of the film, like I said before, was boring. And I ended up scrolling through Letterboxd, looking up what to watch next. I found myself constantly checking the timer to see how much of the film was left, It just runs too long for how boring it is. It didn't start getting interesting until near the end, and of course, that was around Anton's part of the film. Though Anton's segment wasn't that long, it's clear that the directors really wanted his part to be one of the highlights. It almost seemed kind of like they saved the best for last. What was interesting is that they showed Anton doing a satanic wedding in the movie, stating that Anton did them quite regularly. And I don't know how true that is. I'm not saying it's a lie. I just didn't know Anton did more than the famous one from 1967. Of course, like I said, in 1967, he did officiate a wedding, as was seen in news articles from that time, which I'll include here. So the movie also showed shots of Anton's home in what seems to be one of the few films to have done so, especially for this time period early in the Church of Satan's life. I thought this was actually really clever, or I thought it was really clever the way Anton decorated his home. I can't show any screenshots because, of course, this is on Amazon, and a lot of websites like that, they black out the screen if you want to take a simple fucking screenshot for a review. But apparently Anton had, various painting on his walls, one of like a witch's Sabbath, which I thought was really good. And then there was a painting of a devil with like the pipe to the water heater, I believe, coming out of the devil's mouth. I also thought that was really clever. I'm unsure how many surviving photos there are of the Black House, Anton's home, which of course by now has been since destroyed. What's interesting about Anton's scene in this entire movie is that his part is one of the few moments that is not dubbed over in Italian. Granted, some of the language used during the ritual scene, because of course they do a ritual scene in the movie, the language used partially is in Latin anyway, so it's like, well, what is there to dub over at that point? But it appeared to me that the makers of the film must have really wanted Anton in the film in some capacity. It appears to me like they were showing him some respect. We see some other familiar faces in the film with Diane and Carla, and at least one other person that I'm pretty sure was in the movie Satanist. Not talked about or featured is the baptism that Anton performed on his other daughter, Xena. I suppose it probably didn't fit in with the film or probably wasn't relevant, maybe. After Anton, there was a hippie cult from San Francisco talked about, but it was not Charles Manson. Interestingly, this group also rode around in a school bus, but while it remained yellow, they did paint over some of it with like spots and flowers and things. If I could, I would have taken a screenshot and shown, you guys in the video, but once again, anyway. So the leader of this group was in jail. I believe he was in Folsom, I think. It was either Folsom or San Quentin. And he was in prison on marijuana charges, and his group, his cult, basically, was trying to raise the $25,000 to bail him out. And what's very interesting is right before this was Anton's scene, which was not dubbed over in Italian, and then they go to this hippie cult, and it's dubbed over in Italian. I really wish that the creators of this movie kept the native audio in and just had subtitles, because it would have helped frame this film as more of a documentary. I'm unsure of whatever happened to the guy or this hippie cult, but I imagine, considering this was filmed in 1969, that group probably disbanded by the end of that year. Maybe. Right? So after the hippies, we're taken very briefly to Sweden, where we see a group of religious people that reject medicine and rely on prayer only. It sounds something very similar to what like James Hetfield's parents were into. So there is a small story here about a 13-year-old boy who died because he was obviously diabetic, and his mother threw out the insulin he was prescribed. This was very sad to me because it was sad to me that a person would ever do that to a child, especially their own, and then for other people in the group to say, well, they just didn't pray enough, they didn't pray hard enough, and that's why he died. That's so disgusting. But I do give props to the creators of the film for showing, though, that nut jobs like that exist, and in a way existed even still back then, because there's people that still believe that shit to this day. So the film ends over in Los Angeles, where cryogenics are discussed, which, thinking of it, is kind of like, what does that have to do with witchcraft? But that kind of drives my point of this is just a whatever. It's like a nothing film to me. But the idea of freezing a body to hopefully be reanimated later and then fix what caused that person's death is just very silly to me. I've always found the idea of cryogenics to be stupid. I found the company that's described to be predatory, making money off of people's fears of their life actually ending someday. The hypocrisy seems to be hinted at, where the body being frozen would have to have paid for the service. And it's not discussed, but it of course conjures up the question, what happens to these dead bodies when the money runs out? An even better question is, what happens if the company goes under? I don't recommend the film. I thought that it was a waste of time. If you come across it, I honestly would say just skip forward to Anton's part, if you're into the Anton LaVey shit, and then move on. I would pay $1 just to see the Anton scenes and then not even watch the rest, because the rest of it's boring and not even worth it. It's a pretty misleading film where the idea, in the descriptions, it's like black magic, exorcisms, witchcraft. That's not really in the film. The movie isn't scary. It's simply boring. So I give this a 1 out of 5. That's it. That's the review.